Was it?
A really good deal.
What deal?
I'm doing a superhero movie for Sony.
Oh! No! 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 No!
Go kick back when I'm a big man. I ain't never been shit, ain't shit changed. The niggas get lame when you get fame. Can't sleep at night till I get brains. Got a mean ass pipe in a dick game.
So after a nearly 2-year delay, Morbius has finally blessed our movie theater screens, and it's just as bad as I expected. If you watched my previous video, then you would know I was excited to see it because of the vastly different opinions I was hearing. Some were saying that it was trash, others saying it was terrific, so I was intrigued to see if it was a dumpster fire or if it was a masterpiece. But in that video I laid out my expectations, and what I was expecting was something on the same level as Sony's 2 Venom movies, which are pretty bad movies, but I find them fun in their own way. So, to Morbius. In regards to my expectations, I gotta say,
it didn't disappoint.
I'll go over that more later, but for now, let me give you the 411 on the gist of the movie, then we'll go over the good, the bad, all that shit. And then towards the end, we'll talk a little bit about spoilers, mainly the end credit scenes. So Jared Leto plays Michael Morbius, a doctor who is searching for a cure for the rare blood disease that he and his friend Milo, played by Matt Smith, have had since they were kids. This leads to him splicing his DNA with bats, curing him, but now he's a vampire, and has a thirst for blood. Now that you got the idea, let's talk about the positives.
Hey, Paul!
So for the things I think are pretty good are first and foremost the cast. They're all fine. I didn't think anyone was that annoying or unbearable. I thought everyone did a decent job with what they were given, which for some of these characters wasn't that much. Now Jared Leto as Michael Morbius I thought was pretty good, and I liked him. This was a less eccentric performance from him, so he wasn't over the top or forcing anything. It was more low-key and calm. Overall I thought he played the character pretty well. Now my personal favorite character here is Matt Smith as Milo. He actually plays his role a bit more over the top, and is really fun when he's on screen, especially in the second half. He looks to be having a good time, and honestly, I enjoyed it. Matt Smith is awesome, man, what can I say? And all the side characters I thought were fine. The 2 agents looking for Michael Morbius were okay, even though their characters weren't that important to the overall story, and their subplot doesn't really go anywhere. And the female doctor who works with Morbius is alright as well. So everyone was just fine, with no one really being terrible, with Matt Smith being the standout, and Jared Leto giving a much more restrained but good performance. And there were some pretty fun moments of action here and there, nothing crazy or groundbreaking, but there were several times where I thought, hey, that was pretty cool. Those moments were when it didn't look like shit, but we'll get to that later. But there were several times where he uses his powers and starts zipping around in slow-mo and jumping off buildings, and I thought it all looked pretty cool. But the thing I personally enjoyed the most was actually seeing Morbius search for his cure, then after getting his powers, trying to figure out how they work and learning the limitations, which was more so just in the first 30 or 40 minutes of the movie, before it switches gears. But I found that stuff interesting and would have liked to see more. And I like this idea that gets presented here about Morbius seeing himself as a monster and not sure if he can control his hunger. It's an interesting idea, but it's not explored as much as I wish it was. I guess it's not the biggest praise because it's not expanded upon, but it's brought up and I like the idea of it. And that's about all I really gotta say for things I find legitimately pretty good. Clearly that's not a lot, and you're about to see me list off a lot of things that this movie either doesn't do well or is lacking. But even though I'm about to give a lot of criticism, I still don't hate this movie. I'll explain in a bit, but let's talk about the stuff that isn't so good. Okay, first off, I want to talk about the editing. It's fucking weird. There will be several cuts and multiple angles in just one scene, and it happens a lot during action sequences, which can make things disorienting as hell. And as for the action itself, it's a mixed bag. Like I said earlier, there are times where it's pretty fun and some cool things happen, but other times the editing makes things hard to follow and it's hard to see. Like it's way too closely zoomed in, which further obscures your view. And what doesn't help is that there's these streaks that come off of Morbius when he's moving super fast, and it looks cool at times, but then other times it looks like a fucking blurry mess. And this goes for the CGI too. At times it's pretty solid, like the effects they use on his face when he transforms, it's pretty good, but then other times it's pretty lacking. Not completely terrible, but definitely not as good as it could be, and not as good as you've seen it at other points in this very movie. Now earlier I mentioned that I liked seeing Morbius look for a cure, and then test his abilities to learn his limitations. I also mentioned that this lasted for about 30 minutes before it switches gears, and that's when things start to move along at a breakneck speed. Things will just start happening, and the entire movie starts moving from event to event to event, and doesn't really let certain scenes or events or moments last as long as they probably should. And because of this fast pace, it makes characters and subplots feel hollow. Like the agents just feel kind of useless. Their subplot for looking for Morbius doesn't really amount to much really. At a point, it just starts to feel like a bunch of scenes and events quickly thrown together back to back to back. It's like they went, okay, we gotta speed this up a little bit. Really thinking about it, this movie feels like it was supposed to be like 2 hours or 2 hours and 15 minutes long, instead of the hour and 44 minutes it currently is. I think they wanted to tell a slower paced story with Morbius exploring his powers, more of the agents, and seeing more of Milo's character. I mean, just off the top of my head, there are easily 4 or 5 scenes that are in the trailers that aren't in the movie. So clearly things are cut. And considering that the first 30 minutes feels different from the rest of the movie, I'm more than certain that they did this to keep it below 2 hours, similar to what happened with Venom. Nearly 30 minutes of that movie was cut. So this leaves to the second half of the movie feeling pretty rushed, and things not explored as much as they should be. Also, there are some tone issues here too. I don't think it's as bad as Venom in this regard, but it does have moments where it's being serious, then it starts to be a little goofy, and then it's serious again with a few awkward attempts at humor. Then it feels cheesy and goofy again for a brief moment. I don't think it's as jarring as it was in Venom, but it's definitely noticeable. And on top of that, towards the end, Morbius and the female doctor start to have a romantic relationship, and it feels weird. It kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, they're both doctors and they work together professionally, and in those scenes they're fine, but there really isn't a romantic connection between them. So when they kissed each other, it felt off. Also, the music was lackluster, except during the final battle. It was okay. And the last thing isn't really a negative, but more so interesting. There are a few times where I feel like it just lives a few scenes from Batman Begins. Like, there's a moment where Morbius is standing inside of his giant tube while the bats swarm and fly around him, and then later on he uses a giant swarm of bats during the climax. Like I said, not really a negative, just kind of funny. So, this movie isn't that good, but I don't hate it. In fact, I enjoyed parts of it and was fairly entertained throughout. Sure, there were things I wish were explored more, and the action can look like a mess, but it isn't the absolute dumpster fire that I heard, but it's also not this underrated great movie. Honestly, it's just fairly below average that has moments that are pretty cool and fun, and other moments that are pretty lackluster. I guess it feels more so underbaked than just outright terrible, but it was basically what I thought it was going to be, right on par with the other Sony Venom movies. They share a lot of the same issues, but I think Morbius has times where it does things better than those movies, and times where it does things worse. And since we're on the topic, I want to talk about Morbius in comparison to the other Venom films, and the reason I don't hate it despite it being pretty bad at times. The reason is, I went in with relatively low expectations and just wanted something entertaining, and I was thinking it was going to be on the same level as Venom, and that's exactly what I got. I can't hate this movie because it does things that the Venom movies do that are issues, but the majority of people just seem to brush them off. Like the choppy editing, the fast-paced story that doesn't let moments and plot points last as long as they should, the cookie-cutter story, the spotty CGI, and the action sometimes look like a mess, and hell, even the villain is just an evil version of the hero with similar powers. The only reason I think Venom 1 and 2 get away with it is because people really like Venom as a character, and people really like Tom Hardy as an actor. So they can look past the choppy editing, the spotty CGI, the inconsistent tone, and at times the goofiness of the whole thing and just embrace it. I don't think Morbius is getting the same pass because Morbius himself just isn't as popular as a character as Venom. And Jared Leto, well, he's Jared Leto. People either seem to love or hate him. Ironically, just like the Venom movies, Morbius would have definitely benefited from an R rating. I want to reiterate, this isn't a good movie, but I find it entertaining and I can have fun with it. It has some cool ideas I wish were explored more, and it does have some pretty cool looking action and visuals at times. Very similar to the Venom films. And really thinking about it, if I were to rank the Sony Venomverse movies, I would put Let There Be Carnage at the top, with the Venom at the bottom, and Morbius right in the middle. It's not as goofy and funny and self-aware as Let There Be Carnage, but I actually found it a much easier watch than the first Venom movie. All these movies aren't that good, but they're fun, and this is how I would rank them.
You don't deserve our money, you homophobic asshole.
What are you, fucking gay?
Alright, the only thing left to talk about are the end credits scenes. The first one is kinda dumb. For context, this movie was supposed to be released before No Way Home, so this first end credits scene feels tacked on. So the sky opens up and Adrian pops into a cell. He's confused on how he got there, but basically he somehow came from the MCU to this universe. But I don't think that's how the spell that Doctor Strange cast in No Way Home works, so this one's kinda dumb. And now the second end credits scene is Morbius going out of his way to meet up with Adrian, now in his Vulture getup, and Vulture suggests that they team up, and he mentions Spider-Man, and then Morbius just agrees, which was weird because why? Why team up? I don't get it. Honestly, I'm just gonna ignore these end credit scenes, because I don't think they really added anything to the movie, and hell, for all we know, they might just get ignored later on. Also, I like how there's a clip of Adrian in the original trailer that isn't in the movie at all, so I'm curious what the original interaction between these two was supposed to be. Maybe he was supposed to be that universe's version of Adrian, instead of the MCU's version? I don't know. It's all just kinda stupid if I'm being honest. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Morbius. It's about as bad as I expected it to be, but just as entertaining as I thought it was going to be as well. Honestly, I don't think it deserves to be the second lowest rated comic book movie ever, and it's really just on par with the Venom films. I don't think it's as goofy as those two movies, and they all share a lot of the same issues, but at the same time I find them all entertaining. Almost kind of like in a mid-2000s comic book movie kind of way, although I would be interested in seeing like an extended cut of Morbius that has like 15-20 extra minutes, because there's definitely a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor. And hell, shit that's in the trailers that's not even in the movie. But that's just what I think. So now I want you to go ahead, leave a comment, let me know what do you think about Morbius. Is it absolutely terrible? Is it severely underrated? Leave a comment and let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, go and drop a like on it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
This is so awkward, but I understand your hatred for the principal and her administrators. I've seen the way they treat you. Worse than a piece of dried-up dog shit.
Thanks. Most girls wouldn't be so understanding after they'd just been raped.